Hey, everybody, it's Tommy Canale, and welcome back to Before the Lights podcast, the show to find out how those in sports, music, and entertainment made their mark. Go get your coffee or get a drink and get ready. Today, we have the author of the book, Good Luck Frenchy, and bestseller, Prisoner of Bangkok, a shocking and outrageous story of a former heroin addict. His life was portrayed in the movie Most Wanted, which was based off his true story that includes drugs, murder, threats, violence, conflict of interest, political corruption, and cover-ups. This was a blatant disregard to the humanness and a travesty of justice. He's worked 15 years in a law firm from Gibson, British Columbia. Please welcome to the show, Alain Olivier. Alain, how are you, sir?
Good. Thank you for having me. It's very kind of you. By the way, I'm in Montreal.
You're in Montreal.
This whole story occurred in Vancouver years ago, 30 years actually ago.
Okay, so we are in Montreal. Let's go way back. Tell me, what was your childhood like?
Pretty normal childhood. Plenty of sports. I was hyperactive when I was a kid, so my mom knew better and just let me play outside until my batteries ran out of energy. And we didn't have any medication back then for people suffering from, let's say, hyperactivity like me. So sports being my exit for a long time. And I grew up in a small town in a very normal family with people around me that were pretty religious too, I could say. And I studied to become a forest ranger, which I got my diploma back in 1977. And after that, I went on the road to play music and to work as a stagehand for many bands and started partying. Many kids back then, and that was the beginning of what we would know of the tsunami of cocaine that came to America late 70s and early 80s. So we were partying pretty hard at the time, and at some point I thought the west coast of Canada would be much quieter and I would find a normal life and get a job and everything. And at some point, early 80s, I decided to move in Vancouver, where I started working on construction and as a tree planter over there. And at some point, I decided to move over Gibson's Landing, where they used to have the TV show Beachcombers that lasted for some like 20 years with Bruno Geruzzi. That was my little paradise. I thought that I found heaven over there, and I live on a small farm and work on tree planting. I had a pretty normal life, and I was still partying on the West Coast, actually, but I had stopped partying 7 days a week, and I had pretty much normal life. And at some point, at the end of old season of tree planting across British Columbia, I decided to travel across Eastern Asia. And when I got there, I got severely hooked on heroin, and this is where pretty much all the bad stuff started. Great trip, but this is life, and I mean, I've been through that now.
Yeah, before we get into that part of the story, based on what we've already talked about in my intro, how long have you been clean now?
I stopped using heroin when I got out of the hole from confinement in a Thai prison after the coup d'etat that they had in Bangkok in May 92. I've been wearing chains for 42 months at that point, and I was in the hole because, as we will talk a little bit later on, I wasn't conforming to all the rules inside the prison, and I had to pay the price for it. And when I got out of the hole and the appeal court said that I wouldn't be executed, I realized that I had a chance to live, and for that I needed to stop heroin. And after seeing a good friend of mine doing an overdose and dying and before my eyes, I decided to stop. Being clean for all that time, except for when my mother died, that I ended up on a bench for a whole week and decided to stop. And I've been clean ever since, except to smoke a joint because it's my medicine, because I'm I'm having trouble with the arthrosis and stuff like that after sleeping 8.5 years on the concrete floor.
Yeah, I can only
I need
imagine.
some medication, and over here it's legal in Canada all over, so I don't mind talking about it.
Sure. Alain, how bad was your drug habit then?
Before going to, by the time I got back, I went on a trip over to Thailand for about 3 months. I went in Thailand, Malaysia, Burma, and I went to Nepal. And when I came back, I was severely hooked. I was doing several grams of heroin, pure heroin every day. And I realized my tolerance about drugs was, I mean, just amazing. In the same way that some of my friends would only look at a line of heroin and they would start nodding out, and it had the opposite effect on me for some reasons. And I was chasing the dragon by both hands. I was smoking, sniffing, and when I got back to Canada, I brought back a few grams with me to slow down my daily use of heroin. And when I got back home, Gibson's Landing, this is where I was introduced to that guy who framed me up, Glenn Barry. And he started doing the heroin that I had, and he took me out fishing on a fishing boat. And after a couple of weeks of using, I ran out of it, and I went through a cold turkey. Like I don't wish that to anyone. It's hard for people to understand what a cold turkey is like and what it is like to be a junkie on heroin. And those who've been through that will understand what I'm talking about. I mean, it's the end of the world. Whatever, if it's physically and mentally, it's a pretty long process to get out of that. And in Gibson's, after I stopped using, I went back to work up in the forestry planting until I got an accident and I had to come back to Gibson's Landing. And at that point, Glenn Barry was the owner of that boat who was taking me out salmon fishing, offered me to become his partner in the business. And this is basically when I ended up shaking the hand of the devil. Plain and square, because right after that is the one who gave the RCMP my birth date and my name, and they did a background check and came out a whole pile of criminal convictions for drug violence and weapons and stuff like that, but that didn't belong to me.
No, and that was 1987. There was a code name Deception, which was a 15-month investigation that involved 17 major players. You were being mistaken for someone else, like you said. You had no convictions on your record, but they said you had 11 priors for drugs and theft and robbery. Did you ever find out who they mistaken you for?
Yes, I did, but it's not really important who that person is as far as I'm concerned, and it's a grave error from their part. And more than that, as a result of that background check, I ended up being classified as the target 1A, which is at the top of the heap. There's no one that can be higher than that's basically like if they were comparing me to Escobar, but for heroin on the west coast of Canada. And there was nothing true about it. All this was made up by that guy, Glenn Barry, who was a master fisherman, actually, who baited them by telling them, like in the movie Jim Gaffigan did, by saying that I was a major international heroin importer and trafficker, and none of this was true. All I was a junkie.
Correct. Glenn Barry, he was an RCMP informant.
Civil agent, paid civil agent. He was paid 120 grand to frame me up. Look, that guy went as far as getting his brother-in-law busted for 4 ounces of pot when he asked his brother-in-law to sell for those 4 ounces to a RCMP undercover officer. So that can show you how low that guy was ready to go. And in that case, which was the William case in Vancouver, the RCMP and him were convicted for entrapment, and William was released and walked free after that because the court said the guy had been entrapped.
Wow. I want to talk about you finding a bullet casing on the boat. There's a little bit of blood there. there was a couple guys came out, only one came back. Were you under the impression that one was murdered out at the lake?
For sure, that was on the open ocean. Glenbarry, about a week before the incident occurred on the boat, after we got our fishing license and charter business license, and I became partner with him in the business, he decided to introduce me to some of his friends who apparently had just gotten back from Colombia with a whole container of cocaine. But they wanted to stop dealing cocaine and change in their product to heroin because it was easier for them to carry and so on. They had a perfect story with the cleaning crew on the airplane, etc., etc. And I met these guys mid-July, and they were dressed just like these guys at the time in Miami Vice with Hawaiian shirt and golden watch and loafers and slacks, and they played their role very well, and the gold chains and the pile of money in their pocket. And they started telling me that Glenn had been telling them good things about me and that they wanted me to go to Thailand on their behalf to find them a source of heroin. And I told them I didn't want to do that, that I was working on the boat. I thought I had found the dream life, going on a boat every day outside fishing with people that I was taking out or with friends, and I was living on a boat. That was the perfect setting. And Glenn had been telling them that I brought back over some like 100 grams of heroin from Bangkok at the time, which was completely false. And these guys, I never agreed with what they said. I told them, no, I cannot do that. And I told them, if you want to find someone in Thailand, all the tuk-tuk drivers over there in Bangkok will sell you heroin. There's no problem. If they don't smell cops around, they will sell it to you. There's no problem with that. And after I told them that I wasn't ready to go with them, the weekend after, Barry Bennett, one of the cops, showed up with a stranger that had never met him before. And they came to borrow the boat I lived on at the marina and to take it out for 3 days. And no problem. I had another place to stay. My girlfriends, I didn't mind. So Bennett arrived on that Friday morning, July 24th. And on Saturday, he called from apparently Vancouver Island to talk with Glenn Barry, and I was next to him when he was talking to him on the phone, and Glenn Barry was asking him if he had dug holes in the body to make sure the body would sink at the bottom and that where the crab would eat him up. And I thought he was making a joke because he was laughing on the phone at the same time as he's only playing a joke. And the following day on Sunday morning, around 9 o'clock, when I saw the boat coming in at the marina, I went right next to the berth and I held Barry Bennett to tie up the boat. And as I was tying up the boat, he walked out and I couldn't see the stranger on the boat. He had disappeared. And Bennett just looked at me with his cold eyes and he walked away. And as I start looking inside the boat, the first thing I saw was splatters of blood here and there. And then I looked down on the floor, and I saw one casing, and then a second one, 9mm casing. And I just froze there. I don't know what to think. And as I pick up the two empty casing, I look up and Barry Bennett was leaving after he had a couple of words with Glenn Barry, and I walked to Glenn Barry to show him the empty casing. And I asked him, what the fuck is this? I said, we're doing business here. We're not here to have such scenario happening on the boat where people will find empty bullets. And this is where he grabbed me and he says, you're going to do what we're going to be telling you to do. Otherwise you're going to, the same thing will happen to you. And this is where the campaign really started to incite me to go to Thailand on their behalf to find them a source of heroin. They were ready to pay my plane ticket, my traveling expenses, which they did. They also offered me 10% of the amount that they wanted to purchase over there in Bangkok. At first, they wanted to purchase 10 kilos, which meant 1 kilo of heroin delivered at home, and I was a junkie. After the murder scenario, I just started doing heroin again just to run away from the reality that I was facing, because at that point, I had become an accessory to murder as well, because I had tampered with the crime scene. I had manipulated empty bullets and everything, and they made me Glenberry made me understand that I was part of it, that I wanted it or not. And this started to put pressure on me for the next 18 months, chasing me across Canada to push me to go to Thailand, until they started threatening me to go after my mom and my dad.
First off, there really wasn't any murder. They dropped somebody off on the other side. You had no idea that. So just for our listeners, there wasn't any murder, although he's being framed to be an accessory to murder and believe that there was a murder taking place. And they're threatening Alain to be killed or go to Thailand. And you talked about federal agents paying your way. And this is a question that I have. If you were such a big time dope dealer that they thought you were, you wouldn't need them to pay your way. You'd have enough cash, correct?
This is exactly what I told the court here. But they didn't see it that way. They rather believe the words of our RCMP members than the word of the junkie. Never mind all the evidence that were corroborating everything that we presented before the court.
And the international heroin importer trafficker that was set up was for a buy of heroin that would be valued around $15 million.
Yeah.
How hard?
This is the RCMP price, which means about $6,000 a gram. So the bigger the number and the more people get hooked to stories like it, and easier that was for them to justify their action by saying that they had busted me with $15 million worth of heroin. First of all, I'm not the one who was buying it. They were the one buying it. I'm not the one who was selling it to them. There is no conspiracy law in Thailand, and according to the law, I couldn't have been convicted since I did not manipulate the money or the drugs. But the RCMP came to Thailand at my trial and perjured themselves to tell the court that I was at the head of a big international organization dealing heroin out of Thailand and all across Canada, and that I had a criminal record, and none of this was true.
Alain, how hard was it to find someone to do this buy in Thailand of this quantity?
When I got over there to find a source, it's a guy here in Quebec who knew someone who was living over there like 6-7 months a year. That person was a junkie. That guy only had one leg, and he was doing heroin, and he was living over there with his wife a good part of the year. And I went to Chiang Mai with the picture of that guy and his wife with a name. And I went to the porn hotel in Chiang Mai where I was supposed to meet. I could find, a Thai guy named Santi Penta, but his nickname was Porn, the same name as the hotel. And when I got there, I went in the hallway at the reception, and the lady says, "Yeah." I asked if she knew Porn, the tuk-tuk driver. She says, "Yes, he's sleeping in his rickshaw outside." The guy was pedaling a fucking rickshaw for a living. So we were not playing in the high sphere of Chinese triads and stuff like that. And he introduced me to his sister, who was a hairdresser in a slum on the outskirts of Chiang Mai. And she was cutting hair for a living. And all they were doing was selling a gram here and there to foreigners who were looking for adventure and, a way to get high in Thailand. So this is basically what the RCMP went after, people who were living in a slum on the outskirts of Bangkok. There was nothing to do there with organized crime and playing the high sphere of criminal organized crime. I mean, these people didn't belong to organized crime. Otherwise, Porn wouldn't have had to work on the fucking rickshaw to earn a living. He was making maybe 100 baht a day, which is $5. So, but the RCMP and all the documents through the file here, they made the headquarters believe here in Ottawa at the headquarters that I was at the top of the heap, and that even some documents were saying that in 1998, I had gone over to Thailand to bring back, I had gone over to Thailand 5 times and bring back 15 kilos of heroin on each time, on each occasion. That was completely false. There was nothing true about it. That was all proven here before the courts during my lawsuit against the Canadian government and the RCMP. And they made believe that they were going after a big source, and worse is that the source in question that they were after, porn sister, she refused to make the deal with them because she thought they were cops at the time she met them. And myself, I told her, so they cannot be cops. Bennett already killed one guy on a boat, and he killed another guy May of '88, and I don't know how many others that they made me believe that they had killed. And all of a sudden, she's telling me that according to her, they were cops because someone came in their house to say that they had spotted the Thai police not far. And myself, I couldn't believe that they were cops. And these guys, they had paid for my plane ticket, the money, my traveling expenses and everything. And they were paying for my drugs while I was over there. And at some point after that, after she refused dealing with them, they didn't want to give me any more money, and I was a junkie. I needed money to eat because I didn't even have the money to make it back to Bangkok, to the airport, and to get out of the country. When I got arrested, I had $5 in my pocket, 100 baht. And they're the one who paid for everything and made everyone believe that I was a top kingpin.
For my listeners, we keep talking about RCMP, and if you don't know what that is, that's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So as we go and talk about RCMP, that's what we're referring to. And they're the ones that implemented the buy-bust operation to get rid of Alain. When did you think you were targeted, or when did you know you were a sacrificial pawn in this whole thing?
At the time of the bust.
So not until the very end you knew you were done.
When I heard Bennett, when I heard one of the police agents from Canada, or CMP Barry Bennett, screaming, police, you
knew you were done.
Yeah.
There was in the movie, and tell me how realistic this was, an incident where you go to the hotel room to have a discussion about how the whole buy is going to take place. Yeah. Was that recorded by the RCMP? And if so, did those tapes ever surface?
Yes, they used them here before the court.
Okay.
And even in the tape, in some section of the tape, in the recording, after the deal didn't work out with porn sister, after it fell off, Barry Bennett in the room, he said to me, there's going to be some fucking unhappy people back home if that fucking deal doesn't fucking work out. And Dop, who played the role of the fat man, turned towards me and says, yeah, we've been waiting a long time for that, Alain. And that it felt like the kiss of death at that point. They had total control of me. They were providing me money to eat and to pay for my guest house while they were staying in a 5-star hotel. They were paying for my drugs, and all of a sudden I didn't have a dime in my pocket. So they wanted to have their transaction going forward. They didn't care at that point whoever would be the source of heroin over there. They were ready to deal with anyone to ensure that they wouldn't come back here in Canada empty-handed, because that operation alone did cost the Canadian taxpayers over $1 million.
So I have two questions. First one, in regards to the night, heading to meet to have the big buy bust that was going to go down. What were your thoughts going there? Were you thinking this is finally over and I just need to get out of here? Or what kind of thoughts did you have?
When the time came to do their transaction, Porn about half an hour before came to the room and announced that he had found another source. There were two Thai girls who were willing to do the deal, but instead to sell them 5 kilos at once, they proposed to do 2.5 kilos first, and actually 2 kilos at first and 3 kilos afterward if everything goes fine. And the RCMP wanted absolutely to do their deal in a public place. And that's why everyone with whom they talked before that, from Friday to Sunday, because Sport introduced them to other people, the Thais refused to deal with them because the RCMP wanted to deal in a public place, absolutely. And for the Thais, that was impossible in Chiang Mai to do that. So At that point on Sunday night, that little Thai girl came, Nipa, and she proposed to do the deal in a parking lot 2 blocks away from the hotel, the parking lot of a cinema that they had over there with the big sign of the movie Rainbow. And I remember pretty well the old place. And the fat man who was the head of their so-called criminal organization agreed to have Derek Flanagan, the RCMP member who got killed over there, to go with me and Nipa to look at where she wanted to do the deal. And we walked out of the room and went with her in her small pickup truck. Her little sister was with us. And she had her brother on a scooter not far behind with a couple kilos of heroin waiting for these guys. So we drove to the parking lot, and Flanagan looked at the place and he agreed the place was convenient to do the deal. And I walked back to the hotel with Nipa while Flanagan stayed over there with the Thais to, let's see, keep an eye on things. And I went to tell Barry Bennett and the fat man that Flanagan was in the parking lot and waiting for them with the money to do the transaction. And at that point, my role was supposed to be concluded. Was to be over with, because all I was supposed to do was to introduce them to a source of heroin, and after that I could walk my way. And at that point, Barry Bennett says, no, your insurance policy that things will go fine and you'll come with us. And they took me, and he pushed up the small truck, a taxi over there that they had all over Asia, and we just jumped in the back for a couple of blocks until we got to the parking lot. And Flanagan was waiting there, and as soon as we got there, Nipa indicated to the RCMP officer, Bennett, Dupp, and Girdlestone to follow her, and she jumped in her truck and she started driving in the alley next to the cinema that they had over there. And Bennett refused to walk, to jump in the truck. So she said, just follow me by foot. And Girdlestone, their so-called plane pilot, appeared with the money. And we started walking. And I drove maybe, I don't know, the distance of a block and a half from there under a light post, and with Nipa and Flanagan. And she wanted to do the deal there at the junction of the street and the back alley that they had there. Under a light post, there was nothing else around. That was totally quiet. It was a dirt road all over. And we walked back to Bennett, and Flanagan explained to him where she wanted to do the deal. And Bennett decided to come on board with that idea, and he agreed to follow us. He asked the money to Girdlestone, and he asked Girdlestone to stay behind, which was about a block and a half, 2 blocks away from where we were parked to do the transaction. It was impossible for him to see anything or to hear anything at that point. And as we got there, the first thing Bennett asked Nipa was, where was the dope? And Nipa's brother was hidden with his back to a fence with a bunch of vegetation covering up. It was dark outside, was pitch black, except for under the post. It was pretty hard to see him. And Flanagan, when we got there, walked behind the truck next to the cargo area on the right side at the back. And Bennett was at the front with the front door open. And over there, they don't drive on the same side as here. They drive on the right side. He had half his body inside the truck. I was standing next to him, and Nipa told her that she wanted to see the money, and Bennett had the bag with the money, and Nipa said she wanted to see the money, absolutely. And Bennett said, no, show us the dope first. And at some point, she yelled to her brother to come out from his hiding spot, and he walked to the truck with the air in his hand, and he jumped at the back. And meanwhile, Bennett opened the bag, and we realized that the bundles of money had been all wrapped up with duct tape. At that point, I told Bennett to fuck off, and I started walking away. And Flanagan said, he's got it. And Bennett started screaming out loud, police, police. And at that point, Flanagan made like 2 steps. He was a pretty big guy, an athlete. And he jumped. He just tackled the guy at the back of the truck in the cargo area and nailed him at the bottom. And the fight started at that point. Nipa was behind the wheel in the truck, and she walked out of the truck. Her little sister was standing nearby, and as Nipa jumped on Flanagan's back to get him off her brother, Pim Pam sat behind the wheel, and Bennett, after that, jumped also on the back of the truck to help Flanagan. At that point, Pim Pam, Nipa's sister, took off with the truck. She turned the corner and sped away. And I started walking backward when I saw that. And when I saw Bennett jumping at the back, I started to walk faster. And as I got at the other corner of the other street, Flanagan was coming running, just like a greyhound. And except that he was 3 times the weight of the greyhound, and I was only 120 pounds, and he nailed me on the ground at the bottom of the ditch, small ditch, and we could see the truck driving away in the dark. All we could see was the tail light, and at some point we heard bang, and we saw the tail light, the brake light at the back lighting up for a couple of seconds, and after that the truck drove away. And Girdlestone asked me, "Who the fuck's got a gun? Where is your gun?" And I told him no one had a gun at all. And at that point, he took me up, and he was screaming for their backup. The Thai police wasn't anywhere around. And after maybe a minute, the Thai police came. 2 Thai police in plain clothes came running, and he tried to give me to them. But at that point, I was wondering what went on. I said, "I don't feel like being shot here in the back alley in Chiang Mai." I started running away. I managed to get free. And Girdlestone started screaming at the Thai police to shoot me several times. And as I was running towards the parking lot where there were people, I wanted to make sure people would see me to ensure I wouldn't be shot there. I started listening to him telling the Thai police, shoot him, shoot him. He was screaming his lungs out. And as I turned back, I saw the Thai police aiming at me with his 357 Browning, all silver. I will remember all the time. I saw his gun, a real 357 Browning, silver Browning. And I said, no. And I dove to the ground, and Girdlestone came running at me and grabbed me again and took the handcuff from the Thai police and handcuffed me at the back. And we walked back towards where the truck was parked at the time of the transaction before it sped away. And Girdlestone nailed me to the ground. And he was worried that something happened for sure, because he was a little bit, like I said in my book, like someone who won the Tour of France on steroids, and he's being asked a urine test after that. He was pretty worried that something bad had occurred. And at that point, as the Thai police held me on the ground, Girdlestone started running away. And as he had maybe done, I don't know, 20, 30 feet, and all of a sudden I saw Bennett walking out from the dark. I started seeing his silhouette, and he was holding on to Nipa with his right hand and what seems to be a handgun in his left hand.
When you got arrested, did you have any drugs on you?
A gram.
That was it?
That was it.
So the RCMP commits perjury to ensure that you are convicted, which was really a cover-up for what really happened. Correct?
But you see, when the RCMP went to Thailand to do their operation, they needed to have what they called ministerial approval to conduct their operation overseas, and they needed to sign a document called liability and responsibility between the 2 countries, and they never did. They never sought the authorization from the minister as well, and they just went over there from their own volition, and they decided to get me down. They even testified here before the court on the oath, superintendent of the RCMP in charge of the operation. He says that they conducted that operation with the avowed goal to have me arrested and sentenced to death over there. And when they were asked, you didn't mind to know that you were bringing a Canadian citizen to his death sentence in Thailand, they said no. And here the judge, they said no problem with that.
The official statement for RCMP Corporal Derek Flanagan says he died of a skull fracture from falling off of the speeding truck and no shots were fired. When in reality, that is not what happened.
If people are willing to take a few minutes, they only have to go at alainolivier.ca, my website, in the section document, and all the documents that were used for writing my book, Good Luck, Frenchy, as well as documents that were backing up the version that Daniel Roby, the movie director, decided to use for the movie. Yeah, all the documents are on my website. All the RCMP testimonies about Flanagan's death are on my website, as well as a document called The Analysis of Flanagan's Death, which contain 175 pages of RCMP false statement and perjuries. And I'm not making it up.
No, I've read it.
Testimony is not even there. It's only RCMP documents, which were all ignored by the court here.
Correct. And I've read those documents. And I'm going to put links in the show notes to that so listeners can go right to it and you can read those for yourself. Because Alain's website's been hacked a couple of times, and that all the RCMP testimonies related to Flanagan's death and all the documents are done in years. From, I forget the years that go up to, but
these are all official documents.
But they keep getting removed when they hack your website.
But myself, I thought if they wanted to eliminate doubts about who would do that, at least erase everything. Not only the documents pertaining to the death of our RCMP officer. That's all they deleted. And even at Weebly in California, where my domain is, the way that they got in my website was through Scrib, where they encrypt all the documents on the website. And it took the first time like 3 weeks to fix that up, and this time again about a month, and that was Scrib. This time that they said that someone probably entered my email and everything to go through my address, my EP address and everything to it. It's a hacker, a professional hacker, and the question we have to ask ourselves is who had interest to delete this document. I talk with many friends of mine who have kids working as an engineer in computering and in engineer in 3D reenactment stuff, and they were professional hackers as kids. And I talk with all of them, and they all say, "Uncle Alain, there's no one." And all the people I know, and these kids, they have very, very high job now. They've been hired. Some of them, they were even hired by the police. So they know what they're talking about. He says, "We know your story. We know you. Nobody would want to screw your website around." And I agree with that. And even I was talking about Dr. Lee Miller, with whom I did the podcast Murder Was the Case. I did 11 episodes with him, and I won 5 awards on the December 31st with what he calls the Bloody Award for all the episodes that I've done. And I won 5 awards, and they were psychiatrists, criminologists, lawyers, and reporters that were participating to that, people who had been victim of wrongful conviction. And just to be everything that they told me on the 31st year, I was here at home like I'm doing with you now. All the comments that I received showed me even more and confirms even more that I'm doing this whole fight for the right reasons.
Correct.
And now I'm happy to see that many people start to be very interested in this old story, and not people like my neighbor. I'm talking people who work in the domain of wrongful conviction, or guys like Gary Jenkins, who used to be a cop, and he decided to drop the cops to become to go to school and to learn law. And there's all kinds of people of all strata of life that been getting in touch with me through my website. To some people were looking even at hanging themselves not long ago, and they read my book and they saw the movie, and they told me that it changed their whole life, and then I gave them a reason to fight. And I'm telling you this, I'm very emotional right now.
That is awesome that you're able to touch lives, save lives, and get people to turn their lives around based on the unfortunate circumstance that happened in your life. Alain, my question to you is, why did you plead guilty?
In Thailand?
Yeah.
I didn't have choice. If I wasn't pleading guilty, they were to shoot me with the M16s with 6 bullets through the heart. And
he received 100 years.
Guilty, and in the morning, I was sentenced to death. And as they brought me back in the bullpen, about an hour after, I was called back before the judge. And Judge Olivier over there, Justice Olivier, offered me to plead guilty in exchange of what? He would cut my sentence and give me a 100-year sentence instead of being sentenced to death. And at that point, I thought about my mom, who already had cardiac problem. She had a heart problem. She already suffered a heart problem for several years with open heart surgeries on 3 occasions. And I believe deep down in my heart that if she would have read the newspaper saying that I had been convicted and sentenced to death in Thailand, that would have killed her. And this is what convinced me to plead guilty and to be sentenced to 100 years, a life sentence in Thailand.
You spent 8.5 years in the infamous Bang Kwang Prison.
Yeah.
How did you face and overcome adversity in there?
Animal instinct, when it comes over you, and there's not one person, first of all, that reacts in the same way. Myself, after my interrogation, first of all, in Chiang Mai, after I got arrested, and having a cop playing with his gun on my head for hours, and after puking on that cop because I was dope sick, I understood that I could stand to everything. And after being threatened for 18 months by the RCMP and ending up in that situation in Chiang Mai, I promised myself that never I would fall down for anyone and fall down in the face of adversity. I would stand to anything. And when I got at the prison in Bambat, after seeing, as I entered over there was one guy hanging on a fence in the barbed wire after he had been shot because he tried to run away from the prison. And being in there and seeing 6 Thai guys naked on a concrete floor under the sun being beaten with the bamboo stick by a guard that just came out from an horror movie. I mean, it was just incredible. And after seeing that, then when they took me to the blacksmith to put shackles on me, when I got the shackles put on me, I said, never, 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 I will stop fighting. I was so enraged. I was humiliated. The physical part, I didn't mind the physical part. I knew I could overcome that. But the humiliation that I felt, and every time we would go to court, they had it on another chain. When you look at the cover of my book, Good Luck, Frenchy, on the left side, it's me. I got 40 pounds of chains around my ankles. That picture was taken by Jim Girdlestone, the so-called plane pilot working for the RCMP, as he went to testify in Bangkok. And as I was about to walk up the step to the courtroom, he took that picture of me with the chains on. He says, you don't mind me taking pictures for our album souvenirs at the RCMP. And I decided to use that picture for the cover of my book to show people what it is to be shackles. And I wore those shackles for 42 months.
Straight?
Yeah.
40 pounds?
No, at about 20 pounds. But when we were going to court, they had it on another chains, another shackle.
Alain, what's the temperature like inside a Thailand prison?
Depends on how hot you like it. Okay, it could, usually it would be, let's say it's like a big oven. It's like between, it could go at 40, 45 Celsius. It means about over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And when I was in confinement, it was like 120. I was in the concrete box on the 4th floor under the sun for like 120 days.
And what's the disease like inside a Thailand prison? Because there's no medical services, correct?
Tuberculosis, AIDS. Every year over there, while I was there at the time, they were in average about 2,000, between 2,000 and 2,400 prisoners who would die from AIDS every year. Between, let's say, Lardea prison and Bang Kwang prison, there were 2 prisons. Let's say it's about 10% of the population who would die from AIDS every year. Another part was from tuberculosis, heart problem, heat stroke, you name it, skin disease. We were washing ourselves with the water coming straight from the Jaffraya River, the river that flew through Bangkok. And I remember sometime they had an oil spill, and all the water coming inside the prison had that filth of oil on top floating, and we had to wash with that. I mean, people had fungus all over their skins. There was, if people read my book, Good Luck, Frenchy, they will have all the graphic details about what it's like to live in a Thai prison. When I smell shit inside prison, people, as they will read the book, they will smell it too, believe me. I guarantee you that.
What's the language barrier then for you? How difficult was it for you to communicate?
My English wasn't that bad when I got there, and I couldn't speak any Thai except good morning and thank you, and it's about it. And the first thing I told myself is you have to learn the language if you want to live that through all that. And I asked the Canadian embassy, one of the assistant to the consulate over there, very Thai and English, they started to learn the language. And I went through a heavy cold turkey inside the prison naturally, because Bambat is a prison where there were only drug cases, from people being caught with a joint or an empty needle or tons of pot or tons of heroin. We had the whole scale over there. All cases there were drug-related cases. They called the place the cure. Believe me, over there, if you go over there with any type of addiction, they'll break it, and the hard way. I've seen people being beaten to death. In my book, I've seen people dying over there every day for 8.5 years. Whatever, if it's from being beaten by dirty guards or whatever, if it's people dying from overdose or from murder. I've seen guys having their throats slit for $1 because they were owing $1 to a prisoner, and that prisoner was a junkie and needed that money to buy his drug, and the guy didn't want to pay him. I mean, I've seen all kinds of things. I mean, it wasn't like a walk on the beach.
No,
it wasn't Alice in Wonderland at all. But like I told you, at some point your animal instinct takes over, and I decided that after being shackled in Bambat, that I would fight to expose the truth, not only for as much for me as for my mother.
What was the lowest point for you inside prison?
When my mother died, just before I came back, after she found out through Victor Malarek, who is played by Josh Arnett in the movie Most Wanted.
Yep, we're going to get to that.
Reporter, after Victor Malarek got all the evidence that I was innocent, as he wrote his book, Got Instinct, in September 96. He phoned my mom to tell her that he had all the evidence that I was innocent. He had managed to get, there was an inquiry in Canada, public inquiry about that old case, and the guy who wrote the report, the investigator, his report was too critical of the RCMP, so the judge put it on the shelf and they rewrote another report. They took the last 40 pages of that report, I'm telling you, so all critics about the RCMP were taken off. And Malarek got to get both copies. And when he saw everything that occurred and that had been covered up at the RC Public Complaint Commission, which, by the way, was led by an ex-RCMP deputy commissioner, who happened, by the way, another coincidence, to be a longtime friend of the superintendent that was in charge of our CMP Operation Deception. So he exposed that old cover-up in the chapter Seeds of Deception in his book, Gut Instinct. And at that point, that forced the Canadian government to take me back to Canada. So that's basically because of all the work that Victor Madarek put in that I succeeded in coming back home. That was because of him. Otherwise, they would have let me over there. And when the first papers from the minister here came to Thailand a few weeks before I came back, I had to sign that paper and to say that I agree with the old content of the paper. And that was from Minister Herb Dre, was in charge of the RCMP at the time in public safety. And that document said that despite my 11 criminal conviction in Canada, that he agreed to take me back home. But I had to sign that paper. If I didn't agree to things that were said in there, I wasn't going home.
So you had to sign it.
And at that point, just as I had gotten those papers, just before that, my mother passed away a week after she talked to Madarek. And actually, I won a prize, a nomination in the award for the best chapter of a story. The best episode on murder was the case due to the chapter I wrote about the passing away of my mom. I had psychiatrists and psychologists in the U.S. who gave me that award on the 31st, and they were all crying. I mean, it was incredible. Even me, I was crying because I know what I wrote there, and that's the way I went through this whole thing. But this whole return to Canada was provoked by Victor Madarek's work, and I decided to sign the paper and not to say a word about those convictions that they were accusing me of having in Canada. So about 3 days before I came back, the embassy came back again with the news that I was coming back home, and they had another paper that I needed to sign, and that the Thais needed to sign, which said that I had, again, 11 conviction in Canada. Until the morning that they came to pick me up, I had 5 guards from Correctional Service Canada that came to Thailand to pick me up at the prison. And these guys, I knew that they were mistaking me for someone else. Because 5 guys, listen, all right, I was training 6 hours inside the prison. I'm only 5'7", but I was pretty cut, but I don't have any tattoos or anything. But they were afraid of me, and I could see it. And even at the immigration, because I had to spend a whole night at the immigration, the morning before leaving, they had to take pictures of me and my fingerprint again before the RCMP, the Canadian Correctional Service Canada could take me to the airport and to take me home. So the Thai police took my fingerprint and compared them with the fingerprint these guys had come with from Canada. And when they started comparing them, they didn't match. And now the Thai police started scratching their head with this. And more than that, the day before, I had gotten my head basically shaven. Even the picture they took of me didn't look like the fucking picture I had on my prison card. So they decided that I wasn't the proper guy, and for a moment they refused to let me go. That's the representative from the Canadian embassy, Thai lady, who just got pissed off and started telling them that no, they had the proper guy and everything, and she finally managed to get things to work everything out and to get me on the plane. Yeah, that was something.
Did you have to spend the 8.5 years minimum to get out of the Thai prison?
According to the Treaty of Exchange, the United States has the same treaty. It's a prisoner treaty. Most treaties are bilateral between Thailand and whatever country you're from. And usually if you're not sentenced to life after 4 years, you can come back home to do the remaining of your sentence in United States or in Canada, or if it's Australia or other countries. If you got a life sentence, you have to do at least 8 years before being eligible to come back here.
Okay.
But in my case, if it had not been for Victor Madarek to push the Canadian government with his book came out. It made it on at the Chamber of Commons on Parliamentary Hill in Ottawa before the government to call for a public inquiry again. So they had their hand tied and they had to take me back to Canada. While all the time I spent in prison was trying to get back here, I made complaints after complaints at the commission in Ottawa, even about Flanagan's death, to tell them that the RCMP had lied about this. And they told me basically to fuck off. Sorry about the term, but this is it. Because they told me that there was nothing to investigate there. I told them, how can you conclude that your investigation is over with? You did not even interview the main witness, Bennett Girdlestone, and jacked up the fat man. Flanagan was dead. And you're telling me that you completed your investigation? How can you say that? And even up to before yesterday, because I filed another complaint to that same commission who changed name lately. I just wanted to see if it was still standing at the same level as before, whereby they were sleeping with the RCMP and walking hand in hands. And they told me again, basically to get lost, even on all the evidence on my website.
Man.
And they told me, no, the court spoke. The commission spoke before. There's nothing to investigate. And you know, the truth will come out one way or another. RCMP lied about the death of their colleague is one thing. It's a matter of public interest, we will say. But that judges of the court, the lower court here in Canada, closed their eyes to all that.
And the federal agents received medals and honors.
They did. They received a decoration in November 2003. At the time, we were going through discovery period with the RCMP prior to go to court at trial, and I think there was only one witness left to interview at the time. And over the weekend, they were flown back to Vancouver, where the commissioner of the RCMP in Ottawa flew also to give them the highest decoration that existed here in Canada.
Alain, the letters you were exchanging and writing back and forth with Victor Malarek, it seemed like every time he got something, it had been opened before he got it.
Yes, it did. Even his letters, I still have Victor's letter telling me that my letters got to the office of the CBC television at the Fifth Estate and that he received my letters in plastic bags with a stamp from Custom Canada saying that the letter had been damaged on the way.
Man.
Even me in Thailand, I was kept incommunicado for several months. And all the letters were stacked up at the Canadian Embassy on the desk of the liaison officer of the RCMP at the Canadian Embassy. And we had to make complaints here in Canada to the government and telling them to give us our mail. I had letters from my mom that had been sent 6 months before, or some of my letters that had been sent. So it became so hard to communicate that at some point I had to pay guards, use the corruption that we had over there to get my letters going out of the prison through the back doors, even at different address to ensure that my mom or other people I was writing letters to ensure that the letters wouldn't be intercepted. When it was proven that they had that they made a murder scenario on the boat, the only way I managed to prove that while I was over there is because I sent a letter to a friend in Gibson who I knew the address by heart and which wasn't in my address book. And I got that letter through the back door to tell him about the murder scenario on that boat. And it's through a trial in Vancouver that one of the lawyers for the defense approached the RCMP about that, including Glenn Barry, and that they had to admit that, yes, they had done that for my own benefit.
The Public Complaints Commission had an original script, but it got shelved, and they made them write a watered-down version that was released to clear all federal police of wrongdoing. And the incident caused a PCC investigator to quit his job. Was this Paul McEwen?
Yes, indeed, it is. He died last year, actually. But he fought as much as he can. But the only thing is because he chose the wrong side, he decided to fight for me and what before the law was right. But Bertrand Giroux was an ex-deputy RCMP commissioner and who ended up after retirement. He ended up being the executive director of the commission, decided that it didn't go along with his own principle and that the RCMP couldn't have done all the things that McEwen said, and that they just decided to whitewash. McEwen's report had 176 pages. And when the final report came out, after they covered up McEwen report, there was only 138 pages. So 40 pages were taken out. Everything that was critical of them. And after that, they just did that.
Wipe their hands with it.
That at the time of Malarac's book in 96, the ex-chairman of the commission was called to write down his impression. And at trial, the judge refused me to file that big box of document that I had from the PCC. And it's only afterward that I found that letters. It's 14 pages written by hand by the ex-chairman of the PCC, Public Complaint Commission. And he said that he agreed with everything that McEwen said about entrapment and the threats and everything. But all these things were covered up again. So it's very, very political. You just can't imagine what will happen.
I know.
If the truth comes out about Flanagan's death. His family, his wife are treating me like they've been calling me a bastard in all the media for 30 years because they believe the version that we're told, the RCMP. Yet in Thailand, if you go look at the newspaper, radio show that they had, TV show for the whole 3 days after the transaction, after the buy and bust, all the newspaper, people can see articles from The Nation and the Bangkok Post on my website where it says clearly that he was shot, and the doctor at the hospital are talking to the reporters, telling them that they had extracted a bullet from the back of Flanagan's head.
And there's even a death certificate from Thailand that shows the bullet entry in the back of the head.
The doctor didn't have any reason to make this up. And it's not only them. Like I said, when I got in prison in Bambat, all the guards, they looked at me like if I was some kind of drug kingpin, because that's the way I've been described to them, and that I had killed a Canadian police. And they were telling me this, and even foreigners were inside the prison who had access to small English station radio in Bangkok. They listened to that the whole week, whereby they were saying that Flanagan had been shot. And 3 days after the event, General Bomroom Kiorai, who was the head of the BMNU, Bangkok Metropolitan Drug Unit, which is similar to the DEA in the United States, came out public and said that the newspaper had it wrong, that there was no gunshot that night. And that was the end of the story.
Glenn Berry, the boat owner, cashed a $40,000 check in Nova Scotia and just basically vanished. Has anything ever come up where he's at or what's happened to him?
He got 120 grand altogether.
120 grand.
Well, yeah. And he was paying by the targets. Better the targets, more money was going to him. And that was coming out from Canadian taxpayers' money. And in Canada, people are against the death penalty, which is totally against the spirit of the law, in the sense that you cannot become a financer of an operation that will lead a citizen to his death sentence in another country when you're against the death penalty. How is it consistent with the law? Then the RCMP were allowed to do that. And here before the court, the judge says, no problem. And the judge got promotion. And tell you what, the judge of first instance, I filed complaints against him, and I was told to get lost by the Judicial Council. And when I went to appeal, a well-known reporter in Montreal called me and to ask me where to sit on the bench for my appeal. And I told him the name of the chief appeal court. Here was supposed to stand there, Justice Yvon Robert and plus 2 other judges. He says, no, it's impossible. Justice Robert just got retired yesterday. I just came back from this celebration they had yesterday for his retirement. So they put another judge there. And another reporter called me a couple of days later to tell me about the name of the judge who was to take his place. And he informed me that he was a longtime friend of the judge of first instance. They spent like 12 years in the same law firm on the same litigation team. So I made a request before the appeal court for his recusation. And it was refused. Otherwise, that would have delayed and everything. And at some point, I decided to go get the recording at the Bureau des Greffes to get all the documentation on record of my request for recusation that day, plus another request that we had. Everything was before the open court and recorded, and the documentation pertaining to the recusation of Justice Wagner had disappeared. And as he was writing his decision in my case, the Attorney General of Canada that I was suing for $47,400,000 promoted him from the appeal court to the Supreme Court of Canada before this decision was rendered. And they're saying there is no conflict of interest there. That guy has now been promoted Chief Justice at the Supreme Court of Canada.
Wow.
And that's why I'm fighting. There's not a fucking night that I'm not waking up thinking about him.
Unbelievable.
Because we deserve better than that as Canadian citizens.
Yes.
As much as for you, when you go before the court, you expect honesty and integrity from judges of the court. The judge of first instance was his friend on his side. Shortly after he rendered his decision, was promoted as role director of the court, and after that he was promoted as president for the selection of committee for all the new judges at the Judicial Council. And they're telling me there's no conflict of interest, that these judges were impartial. Okay, enrage me even more, and it's to have judges of the court telling me, basically calling me a liar when they said in their judgment, and they took the time to write after a minutious analysis of the whole file, there is no evidence that the RCMP lied about the death of RCMP Flanagan. I got a document that is on my website that is 175 pages with only RCMP court documents, not even my testimony. It's all perjuries. I'm giving classes to master classes in criminology and law. I talk with people of all spheres. I know I'm not stupid, and this master degree student that I'm working with and I give lectures to, they're not stupid either. And when I put that document, these students also looked through that. Dr. Lee Miller, who's a criminologist, went through the old document, and he also said it on the air the other day during a podcast in the US, that he's never seen anything as scandalous as that since he's doing what he's doing. He's a book writer and a criminologist. He settled cold case, exposed the truth in cold cases. He even got people exonerated through DNAs and stuff like that, people that I've met. One of them actually was one to remit me an award on the 31st. He had done 9 years in prison for nothing, for having allegedly killed his girlfriend, which he had not done. And it's because of Dr. Lee Miller that guy was exonerated. And it's some university student who hooked me up with him, and I spent a whole weekend at his place in Toronto, and I recorded 11 episodes about this old story, and I won the podcast of the year. So I'm pretty proud.
Congrats.
He said it. That says the truth doesn't lie. He said even people who's not savvy in law or whatever, reading the document I'm telling you about the analysis of Flanagan's death is very, very simple. I spent many years in the law firm, so I know how to work documents. I work to be very ordinate. I mean, I was even proposed by my attorneys to have my study paid in law, because they know I work about the law, and they saw me. And I hate wrongful conviction. I hate injustice. And so to see all that is very frustrating. I can believe that in Thailand, I went through like a kangaroo court, but I was expecting much more here in Canada from the Canadian court, who's supposed to be there to defend my right, my charter of right, my rights under the Constitution. And they haven't done it. Instead, they washed their hands of it. They declared that my case was prescribed, that I had to file suit while I was behind the wall of the Thai prison. So that way, I spent 3 months in court, and the judgment was 38 pages thick. And half of it was about the prescription, saying that I had to file suit while I was behind the wall of a Thai prison. And they even used false evidence. The judge of first instance made up evidence that were false to justify his decision. I signaled that to the appeal court. They used the same false evidence to justify their own decision. And that was the end of it. And by implying that my case was going through prescription, that my case was prescribed, they didn't have to talk about anything else. They said the murder scenario was a proper thing. The 10% reward in heroin was a proper thing. The threat was a proper thing. And more than that, Glenn Barry did not show up at trial. That was a trial by default. He was the number one witness. He was the star witness for the Attorney General. He didn't show up. He didn't even present the defense.
Of course.
And the judge said, never mind that. The RCMP are not responsible for him and his action.
Of all the documents I went through, one kept coming back. I looked at this, I don't know how many times. It is a letter from December of 1994. The RCMP recognized and accepted its role and responsibilities in conviction and sentence. And the next line says, quote, "No, this is not public knowledge."
Indeed.
End quote. That sums it all up right there.
And I'm going to tell you, not an anecdote because it's part of the story, but the judge, when he talked about the prescription, he said that after I got out of confinement in 92 and that my chains were removed after 42 months and that I stopped doing drugs, he said that from then on, my living conditions improved and that I was psychologically apt to file suit from a Thai prison because I could write letters. He never addressed the physical part. How am I going to do that? I'm behind third world country prison. I don't have any communication, no phone, no toilet, no shower, no bed. And my mail was intercepted. And the court here said that my living conditions from 92, at that time you got that they said that life improved. Then you got that letter from 94 showing clearly that I was to die over there due to the harshness of the condition, the last paragraph, you saw it.
Yep.
So all it is that the judge came down to say that my living conditions improve enough to file suit when in 1994 that letter said I'm going to die over there.
Thank goodness you didn't. And I wish you the best of luck. As we said at the beginning, this is a story that included drugs, murder, threats, violence, conflict of interest, political corruption, and cover-ups, and is a disregard to humanness and a travesty of justice. I am so sorry this has happened to you. I thank you for coming on my show and telling just a snippet of what's going on in your life, and I wish you nothing but success in your endeavors going forward.
Thank you for having me and be there to listen and to inform people about this injustice. And like I said, now this whole case is way beyond my own interest at that point. When you have RCMP members lying about the death of the colleague and the lower court closing their eyes to this, it's a matter of public order, and these are matters that the public have a right to, are in their right to know. People can ask for accountability, and this is what I'm looking for in this case. And today I just got a great news about a series on TV to expose all that exclusively. I will tell you more eventually on my website. I don't want to tell everything, but it's a nice way to start the year despite the old pandemic, and the movie continues to make its way across the world, and people will have a chance to see it and talk about it. And I hope people will go on my website and read the information that are there. You got pictures of Josh Arnett and Jim Gaffigan as well, and the old movie crew. And on the set, I took like 6,000 pictures. Of people can look at many pictures, all the documents, newspaper from back in 89 right up to today, the movie promotion. People can look at everything, and most of all, get your book, Good Luck, Frenchy, and encourage justice. And every time you'll be talking about it, that will not only be encouraging me, but other people to see who are looking to get justice into their life. And it's very kind of you to give me all that time.
You are more than welcome. I will put links. Go to my website, beforethelightspod.com. Go to the episode page. I will have links to Giddy, his book, the movie, all kinds of information, documents. Follow us on Instagram at Before the Lights Podcast. If you'd like to reach out and contact me, you can send me an email, beforethelightspod@gmail.com. That's beforethelightspod@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, a salute, a chin chin.